Welcome, brothers, to the Bald Man podcast.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about and continuing the conversation about men's mental health. November is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, so I think it's very pertinent to talk about just what's plaguing men. I think a lot of times male loneliness and male insecurities and male suffering is just kind of goes under the radar. I kind of had a topic that kind of both of us kind of touch on, dealing with losing your hair, but I think the overarching topic is body dysmorphia in men. I think we often talk about how body positivity, especially in the female space, but sometimes in that same vein, men get made fun of it about our own looks the entire time anyway. So I guess, did you have any things that you wanted to add to that, or
Yeah, I think it's a topic that for many guys, especially probably when you're younger, you feel that body dysmorphia, or maybe it's for some it probably is. For others, it's still just a pressure to look a certain way. Society still has certain norms that people are kind of expected to conform to. I think it's gotten better, but there's still a lot of pressure. And for young men, young boys especially, there is constant, kind of, sometimes you call it playful teasing, but it can cut a little bit deeper, especially if you're on the receiving end of it. Whether it's, for me, I was a late bloomer. I was pretty short growing up till I had a little bit of a growth spurt later in high school. But for elementary school, junior high, early high school, I was the short kid. And that was an easy thing to be targeted for. But it could be anything, maybe you've got, obviously hair loss is one of them, especially if it hits you early.
Yeah.
I even had at one point in my life, I thought my nose was too big. I was like, obsess about that for a little while.
I would have never guessed.
It just, it's really, it's not even a thing at all, but it was just for some period in my life, I was kind of like fixated on that. Again, at some point you kind of start like noticing what's the quote unquote norms that you feel like you should start conforming to. And then when maybe you don't feel like you look a certain way, you start to stress about it. Do you have any personal experiences with body dysmorphia or other self-consciousness?
I'm 5'6", so, and that was, maybe after my growth spurt, who knows? But I too was also the short kid. And then, I started losing my hair at 17. So it was already, for me, it was like, man, I'm already the short kid. I'm losing my hair too. This sucks. And for me, I think what kind of struck a nerve was like this idea that I'm the short kid, so everyone's looking down on me anyway. So they're going to see right on the top of where I'm balding, And I think that just exacerbated the issue.
Just put the focus even more on the thing that you're self-conscious about.
I know. I was already not looking people seeing people eye to eye. So it's like, man, I thought that that was kind of the crux of it. I think it comes to how I was raised. I think my parents, they were immigrants. They came here when they were fairly young. Didn't speak any bit of English. So a lot of them, their mindset was behind trying to fit in as much as possible, like to fight against the xenophobia. And I guess part of their journey was to always send us to like the, white schools. So here I am, not only am I short, not only am I balding, but I'm also one of the handful of, ethnic looking people on campus. So I think all
what was that something that you felt a lot of? Were you the target for not being white in a predominantly white school?
I think it was just a lot of like underhanded comments, like everyone would go like, oh, at me, and it's like, okay, great, haha, and then I think it came to a head just kind of what the underlying tone of the entire campus was, because the senior prank for my year was there was a area on campus where a lot of the Asian kids would congregate just naturally. And someone thought it would be a bright idea to chainsaw down all the trees in that area and spray paint Chinatown on the ground, right? So whether it was a like a I don't know really how to describe it, but
Yeah.
you can it's like
Wow.
there's an undertone of that, right? And
Yeah.
whether that they were overt about it or not, that kind of solidified to me. It's like, okay, this is how they really think about me, you know?
Well, and I mean, even if their mindset, which I don't know how your mindset could be this, but maybe they're like, oh, it's just a prank.
Hmm.
I mean, the amount of effort that you have to go through for a
Yeah, exactly.
prank like that just to target a specific group. I think that speaks a lot about,
Hmm.
we've definitely come a long ways, but we still have a ways to go in terms of
Yeah.
um, moving past that type of ridiculous behavior,
Hmm.
where you're intentionally calling out a group,
Yeah.
for really no reason,
Yeah.
in my mind, just to make it clear that yes, this is a focus for whichever individuals decided that was a good idea to do.
Yeah.
um, and I can only imagine for you on you know seeing something like that, like, okay, clearly I'm the target of this.
Yeah. And I think it was just, by then I was already starting, thinking about graduating and such, but it definitely was like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
maybe the people that I thought were close to me, or maybe the people that, surrounded me were never going to be my allies.
Mm.
But I think a lot of that I am, for lack of a better term, I'm thankful for experiencing a lot of that because it definitely did toughen my skin. So, because the world, whether it's they're going to point fingers at me being Asian, whether it's about being short, whether it's balding or whatever, the world's not going to be nice to you. Not everyone's going to like you, and some people are going to be more overt about it than others. But I think that you have to learn the resilience. I think keeping yourself in like this victim mindset is never going to get you far in life. I think you have to have a survivor mindset. Like that, whatever it is, I have what it takes to survive, and move on to the next thing, so that
Hmm.
you can live.
It's kind of an interesting concept, right? Because maybe you were a target in some of these instances,
Hmm.
that maybe did help you build that tougher skin.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's the type of behavior for those who are maybe targeting you, or me, those who are doing the bullying or doing the pranking or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the behavior we want to stop at the same time.
Hmm.
And yet it's this interesting balance, I don't know what the right word is, where
Yeah.
that helped to kind of maybe build you up, build your confidence,
Hmm.
help you be resilient. And yet, you know those are things that no one should have to have
Of
to be the
course.
target
Of
of.
course. Yeah.
It's
But
just an interesting part of life.
I mean, is there ways that you have found, uh, either to gain resilience or like kind of cope or overcome your own insecurities?
Well, I think I took the incorrect strategy of retracting, becoming a recluse.
Hmm.
I would make the effort to try to avoid people throughout the day,
Sure.
because I remember a few instances when I had just gotten my driver's license. So I was 16
Hmm.
and I had not gotten my growth spurt yet. I was literally like 5 foot tall, 5'1" maybe.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
I
Really
was
short.
really short.
Yeah.
And I would just be really self-conscious just driving around because I knew how like young I looked. I knew how small I was. So
Sure.
and then I remember I had to go get gas and I got out to pump gas, and the guy who is like pumping gas next to me, he like looked over and he's like, "Are you sure you should be driving?"
Oh man.
Like I was like, "Okay," like, it just like made every one of my like stories that I was telling myself like, okay, that's true.
Yeah.
And so that just made me want to sort of again like retract, like
Mm.
become more reclusive, because I just felt like interactions with other people would skew negative like that.
Hmm.
In reality now, as I've gotten, older, wiser, dealt with other, hair loss was another major thing that I dealt with in terms of self-consciousness and wanting to just like hide from the world rather than, um, just be, out there and open and just kind of deal with the good and the bad.
Hmm.
Um, and so as I've gotten older and dealt with more like that, I've realized that retracting is the opposite of what you should do.
Right.
If there's things that are bothering you, um, I think it's really, really bad idea to just hold on to those things internally.
Hmm.
It's it's really important, I think, to have somebody you can trust that you can talk about those problems with,
Yeah.
even if that person can't solve those issues for you.
Hmm.
Sometimes just getting our insecurities, getting our fears out in the open, it makes them less scary.
Yeah.
Um, and so that has helped me a lot. I've learned to really just be more open. And part of the thing that's really helped me with, just embracing the bald look was actually starting YouTube and starting TikTok and just being like,
Hmm.
I'm going to lean into this 100%.
Yeah.
And to be 100% open about my hair loss journey, about my insecurities about it,
Hmm.
about going through getting a hair transplant and then later on ending up not liking that and shaving my head and just being totally open and transparent about all that
Yeah.
has like made me immune to any like judgment or insecurity. It's been really kind of amazing. Just
Yeah.
putting light on all those things that I was insecure about has made me less insecure about them.
Yeah, I think I felt the same. And like there was a really good analogy that stuck with me, and that was like if you go to Yellowstone National Park, there's
I just went there a few months ago.
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So there's they were watching the like bison versus the cows, right? And when storms would roll over, the plains, the cows would run away from the storm, right? That's a natural response. Storm is this dark, ominous cloud, right, pouring lightning and rain. You run away from it. But in doing so, when you're running away from the storm is faster than the cows all the time. So they actually, while running away, stay longer in the storm than the bison because the bison will actually turn head face towards the storm and run right through it, making the
Hmm.
storm pass over them faster, right? And I think it kind of goes to what you were talking about, that facing the issues um, actually makes it so that it actually is not so bad. Like it's like you have to face your fear and hit heads like head first into the storm, which is terrifying. But after the storm has passed, it's over. Rather than running away from it, which is like going reclusive. I did the same thing too.
Yeah.
It seems to have prolonged the issue. Like I took finasteride for over a decade, and essentially that's just prolonging the suffering of the balding process, which is something that as you can see already we both already went through it, and now it's like yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah. I love that analogy. That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Because it's so true. You could run from the storm. It's gonna catch you anyway in most
Hmm.
cases. And if you're continuing to try to like run away from it, it's
Yeah.
just gonna stay over you longer.
Yep.
Versus running right into it, you're gonna feel it sooner, and it might be painful in
Hmm.
the beginning, but then you keep on going and it's gonna pass much quicker.
Yeah.
Um, that's a really great analogy. I think
Yeah.
that applies very much to hair loss and certainly to a lot of other
Yeah, definitely.
body insecurity type of issues too. Just
Mhm.
em- embracing it, leaning into it, being open about it, and that storm will pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I saw
Yeah.
and we touched upon this a little bit before, but like is it necessary to do other things to cope with the balding? Like I always give myself this rules like I can either be bald or fat, and that's for me. I'm not saying that for
Hmm.
anyone else, but for me, it's like I can only allow myself to have one of those. And well, one of them's already decided for me, so I guess I can only
Yeah.
be bald.
Well, it's
um,
interesting because in concept, one of those things you can control, and one of those
yeah,
things you you can control, but not as much. You don't have
right.
as much control over. Um, so Was there, I guess, a thought behind why those are the two things that you were just thinking that it's kind of interesting? One of them you have more control over, one that you don't. Or is that just motivation to be like, well, okay, I'm going to embrace the bald look, so that means I'm going to lean into heavy on like
I mean,
staying in shape?
I've always been into fitness. My family has always that's one of their core tenets is like first impressions matter. So I think that kind of is like the core of that whole statement. It's like, well, if you have hair and stuff, well, then you have already one less, knock on you. So if you, gain some pounds, that's okay, but if you're bald, then, you can't, have too much because then it almost, unfortunately and unfairly, being, losing your hair, is already kind of a downside, to a lot of people, at least maybe internally. But and then gaining weight, you just kind of look like you just don't take care of yourself. So it's like two things where it appears like you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah,
So
I get that. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
the aesthetics or the just the overall look. I
hmm
mean, obviously, I agree. I mean, I think first impressions do matter, especially for especially as you get into like the professional world.
yeah,
Um, but so I'm curious. Do you think that has helped you, just that process of staying in shape and working out? Has that been a helpful kind of coping mechanism for you in terms of like, obviously you mentioned a couple insecurities.
yeah.
Has
I
that
think,
been? Yeah.
yeah, I think it definitely helps. Like when I first shaved my head, I was already pretty fit. I'm actually very proud of the body been able to achieve. But it definitely helped. It's like, all right, I shaved my head. I looked in the mirror and it's like, I'm still ripped. And now the bald look is just more focused on the ripped part. So, all right, I can live with this. I
hmm
definitely softened the blow of, the very first shock of seeing myself fully bald.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but, um, now that I've been bald for, maybe 2, 3 years now, um, it's, I've allowed myself to not have to be super, super cut anymore, and I'm still okay with that. Um,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
wanted to just jump back for a second, real quick,
sure,
on
yeah,
so the whole I can be fat or I can be bald, one of the two.
yeah,
Um, I wanted to ask you, in terms of like the thing, because we were just talking about like things you can control. So
hmm
yes, you can control how much you work out and staying in shape and things like that. Hair, not as much. However, the one caveat there is you do have control over whether you are balding or
hmm
fully bald,
yeah, that's a good point.
right?
Yeah,
And I think embracing just the fully bald, all right, I'm going to shave it all off.
hmm
Um, I think that shows like, hey, I am still in control of this aspect of it.
yeah,
And I think in doing so, that does still put forward a good first impression of like, okay, this is a person who clearly they were losing their hair and they just decided to take that step that like, all right, I'm just going to be done with it because obviously there's varying stages throughout the balding process. But
yeah,
at a certain point, um, let's just be honest, that balding doesn't look great,
yeah, yeah, I
right?
agree.
If it's very thin or you're doing a comb over or doing these other tricks to just try to make it look like you're not balding, but it's very
hmm
clear that you are.
Yeah,
Um, that I think puts forward this sort of self-conscious front
hmm
versus
yeah,
just embracing it. Is again talking about that storm. I'm just leaning into it and going into
hmm
it, and I'm embracing it and moving forward. And I think um, so. I don't know. I just wanted to kind of touch on that and get your
sure,
thoughts,
yeah.
if you agree or not.
I think you had mentioned it like in a previous chat, but what's that phrase or that it's like when you are constantly adjusting your hair, like it's not like a defensive mechanism, it's like a cover up, or you are constantly like fixating on the balding thing. It's like it starts taking up like a lot of RAM in your head.
hmm
Like um I remember fixating on it just all the time. Like, and I think that the moment you let it go, and it sounds cliche, but like you free yourself up to think about so many other things, you know. And maybe
Yeah.
for I think both of you and I kind of hit the same path where it's like, well, instead of fixating on this thing that you're losing, what can I gain out of all this, right? And both of us created YouTubes and TikToks to kind of fully lean into that whole process. And I think both of us have found that a lot of people are really resonating with this
Yeah.
message because, well, statistically, more than half of men will experience balding in their life,
Yeah. Yeah.
So um, whether people are really good at hiding it or have done all the things to try to prevent it, it's
Yeah.
still a thing for most men. So
I
yeah.
know. And I wish I could bottle that feeling that you're talking about, where
Hmm.
after years and years of doing yeah, whether you call them like habit, just habit or like tics or whatever, where you're constantly fussing with your hair, thinking about your hair,
Yeah.
and once all of that is gone,
Hmm.
and you have this sort of just totally mentally freeing feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could bottle that and like give that to people, so then they go, "Oh, this is what it'll be like. This is what
Hmm.
I've been afraid of doing this, really,
Yeah.
because this feels great.
Yeah.
This feels so freeing.
Yeah,
This is
agreed.
really amazing." Because that would just convince so many people. Because I don't know about you, but and I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Hmm.
There is the thing that holds you back from shaving your head. If you know you've been losing your hair, you're stressing about it. I mean, it's just fear, right?
Yeah.
It's a fear of the unknown, a fear of how to look,
Hmm.
and um, I don't know if it's any more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think that it's all. I just remember like that all my fears that I had about losing my hair, that I'd be less attractive, that um, I'd be less respected at work. Um, all those fears just were so much like less bad than I had ever thought they'd be. Because I remember just thinking like, oh, it's like the end of the world almost. And then now that I shaved my head, it's like, well, crap, it's like it's way better. Yeah,
It's the
like
beginning.
yeah, it really is the beginning. Like
Yeah.
all that, all the being before like shaving my head was just a completely different person. Like like filled with fear, anxiety, insecurity, and then after kind of embracing it, I was able to start embracing a bunch of other things too. And then it opened the door for like, well, I've always wanted a beard, and I couldn't grow that. And all of a sudden, after shaving my head, like the doors open to like, oh, well, you can use minoxidil to grow a beard. And it's like,
Hmm.
I'm Asian. I never thought I'd ever be able to grow a beard. Like
Yeah.
it seemed impossible. But now, like these new possibilities, new doorways are open for me. Um,
And I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I actually did get a comment this week from
yeah.
a guy who's like, "Oh, I think I'm ready to shave my head, but I can't grow a beard."
Hmm.
Um, and I think I directed him over to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I think that's we've talked about this before. Is growing the beard? Do you have to have a beard if you shave your head?
Yeah.
I I don't think that you do. I know a couple guys I work with that are completely shaven, no beard, no hair on top, and they look great.
Yeah.
Both guys are in shape, I will
Hmm.
say. So
Yeah.
kind of harkening back to what we were talking about before,
Hmm.
taking control of the things you can control.
Yeah.
Um, but I understand that a lot of people do feel that, like, if I'm going to lose my hair, I do want to have the beard.
Hmm.
Um, so do you feel that having the beard has helped you? Because I've seen some of your older videos where you were totally clean shaven,
Yeah.
and I thought that was a good look too. I
Thank you.
like the beard as well,
Yeah.
but I'm
Thanks.
curious. Do you understand where that fear comes from? Like, okay, I'm ready to shave my head, but I can't
Hmm.
grow the beard, or do you think that that's unfounded as well?
Yeah. I think um, kind of leading back into that analogy of the bison running into the storm. I purposely shaved my head before I could grow the beard, just so I could face my ultimate fear, which is like, okay, being completely bald and having no facial hair is what I would consider, prior to shaving my head, as the worst look I could possibly have. And at the time before shaving my head, it's like, well, I have to have something to kind of round out the look. If the hair's not up here, it has to be down here. But then after shaving my head, like, most people just, it's like, oh, it looks good. It's like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. And then again, yeah, being fit at the time definitely did soften the blow. It's like, oh, okay, well, now I just look like Saitama. I'll take that.
Yeah.
And then I think, just kind of leaning in to like what my worst fear was, and then being like, okay, well then, if this is not so bad and actually is kind of good, then anything on top of that is just gravy.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of to your point, like the whole Lex Luthor look. I mean, that's a pretty good look. And I also, for me, I was like, I was afraid of looking like a monk for a long time, because I'm Asian, being bald is kind of associated with that. But then after watching like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? That's he's a cool character. Why would I be afraid of that?
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah.
And Saitama, as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, someone turned me on to One Punch Man earlier this year, and I was like, "This is awesome." Yeah,
yeah.
This is great. Yeah, and there's a lot of people will point out like, oh, The Rock or Jason Statham, but then people would be like, well, those guys are like super ripped, like bigger dudes. But like then I can point to like who is it, Patrick Stewart?
Yep.
Is another great example.
Yeah. And he even rocks the horseshoe too. So
yeah.
He's probably one of the best Star Trek captains for sure.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Exactly. So there's examples of both, and I do understand that fear of just like, okay, I'm going to lose my hair. I want to have at least like something. But there are plenty of examples where that really isn't necessary at all. And to your point, if you really want to take steps to grow a beard, there's ways to do that.
Yeah.
And you are the
the
shining example of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Because you came from a family where, I mean, no one else in your family can grow a beard. So
yeah,
it's possible.
The funny thing is, like, after shaving my head, it's like, I'm gonna grow a beard, and they all just laughed. And it's like, okay, well, I'll show you. And then now they're like, wow, you have a full beard.
You did it.
Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, well,
yeah,
that's just for me. So
right. Yeah. So kind of jumping back into, we were talking earlier about how a lot of this stuff kind of crops up, I think, when we're younger. These insecurities, some of this body dysmorphia. Do you have any thoughts on your end about, I think as a kid, it's a little bit harder sometimes to run into that storm that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
As an adult, you start getting a little bit more comfortable with doing that. But do you have any thoughts on how maybe somebody in high school or even younger, when sometimes it's harder to run into that storm because it's your friend group, or it's somebody you're going to have to deal with every day, like maybe you have a bully that's been constantly harassing you.
Sure.
Do you have any thoughts on how to handle that, or is running into the storm, is there a way to run into the storm while still kind of maintaining your, not just totally wrecking your self-confidence by doing so?
Sure. I think that it's a lot harder in high school or if you're younger, because it's just what you see around you. If you're starting to lose your hair at like 17, like I was, then it feels like you're the only one who's going through that.
Yeah.
And that could be really tough. I think it wasn't until I started just like really focusing on other people who were bald, and looking at that without fear, but with like, it's cheesy, but looking at that with like love and compassion, right? Because the world itself is just a reflection of how you perceive the world, right? Your perception truly is your reality. And we talked about this last time about how the biggest bullies are people who, especially of balding men, are those who are like losing their hair as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you see like Goose Wayne. He's pretty funny.
Mm-mm.
If we think we lean into the balding look, he really leans into it. So he goes on like those chat roulette type videos, and then he has like the horseshoe, but he grows it out like super long. And there was like one video where he pops on to like a chat with someone, and then the guy was like starting to roast him. It's like, man, how do I get like a bald spot like you, man? And then he's like, looks like you're already on your way. And he's like, what? No, no. And then he does this weird, like, he tries to brush his hair, but like he barely brushes it. So it's like, you can tell that he's probably on his way. Probably has the receded temples.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you just kind of ground yourself that all the bullies in your life, including the one that's within you, you're probably just bullying yourself into thinking that, that you're the only one. And
Mm-hmm.
as you grow up, as you get older, you start to realize that being different actually is an advantage. Like when everyone wants to look the same, and especially now that plastic surgery and makeup and filters and AI is all like, you can literally make yourself look like anything now.
Yeah.
Or even hair transplants, right? Like you can
Mm-hmm.
do all this stuff to kind of make yourself look a certain way. That when you look different, not like it's to your benefit to kind of have that attention, and it's as much attention as you are willing to receive or willing to put out there, right? I've maybe leaned in really hard, and like I'm like, well, I'm gonna really lean into style and fashion instead, right? So now I dress like with like Hawaiian shirts and wacky clothes, because it's like, well, if people are gonna look at me, they're gonna look at me, and that's fine. But at least I can be happy with my choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's all about that. It's just, and as you said, shaving your head is making that choice, right? I am choosing to lean into this look.
Yeah.
I am choosing to be the short one. I am choosing to, and I think giving yourself that autonomy again makes that decision and makes a lot of life a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, I
What
think
your-
you're kind of alluding a little bit to like things like social media today, where it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's easy to compare yourself to others. Now we have access. I mean, you can see you can see people from around the world, and people of all shapes and sizes, and it's easy to compare yourself to others. My light went out.
Oh yeah.
But it's also allows you to realize that there's other people that are like you, because sometimes you can feel alone when you're going through something like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm losing my hair. I'm short. You can then find other people who are going through the same thing as you, and that's the nice part of social media. The
Yeah.
downside is then sometimes you end up comparing yourself to others,
Yeah.
and that can, so it's really
Well,
important to find a balance on things like social media, so that it's helping you and not hurting you more.
well, after
Yeah.
shaving my head, it's kind of funny. Like, there's almost like a secret camaraderie amongst all like bald men after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every time I get into an Uber or like I see another bald guy on like even my clients and stuff, I always like try to poke fun and just be like, I like your look. And it's like,
Yeah.
I like your look too. Or the other,
I like the line, oh, it looks like we go to the same barber.
yeah. Yeah, and then you can follow up as well. It's like, so are you a shaver guy or like a razor guy?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Yeah, it's just another way to connect.
yeah, exactly. And I think
Absolutely.
that's all it is. I think when you lose your hair, you're afraid that people are not going to connect with you. And that's the whole fear, right? That I'm going to be alone in this. I'm the only one feeling this, right? But in reality, it's when you lean into those fears that, and your own, what you think is your weaknesses, that you realize that you're actually not alone. In fact, it's a very human experience. Loss is a human experience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that, finally accepting it has just again opened so many doors that weren't there before. They might
Mm-hmm.
be different than the ones that I expected, but
Yeah.
there are still
And
opportunities nonetheless. Yeah.
yeah, and I was just gonna say maybe this will close us out, but I think that's why you and I both kind of had our own journeys through specifically hair loss, and growing a beard and things like that, and we wanted to like share those experiences with others because I know for me, and I think for you, I wanted to create videos that I wished I had when I was
Yeah,
going through
exactly.
this, because I wanted for anyone who is feeling like they're going alone through this, I wanted them to have like something they could look to be like, oh, okay, it's okay. I'm not the only one going through this.
Hmm.
There's others, and I think it's cool that you know you shared and opened up about your experiences as well,
Hmm.
and hopefully we can continue to help people who feel like they're struggling with this alone to know
Yeah.
that you're not alone.
Yeah, agreed. And you're
Yeah,
not. I mean, clearly, like, you and I were able to connect because of that. So,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
All
cool. I
right.
think that's a good
Well,
way to wrap it up. But
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for chatting.
Well, thanks for joining me again, and look forward to doing this again next week. All right. Talk
Thanks,
to you later.
everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.